أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وجاهد في سبيل الله حق جهاده حتى أتاه اليقين أما بعد. All praise and thanks is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He is worthy of being thanked and praised. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the infinite blessings He's bestowed upon us and blessed us with that we recognize, and those blessings that you and I perhaps take for granted or do not recognize. Because Allah's blessings are infinite and our minds are only able to comprehend finite quantities. And His blessings will always be greater in number than what we can perceive. And so we say Alhamdulillah, thumma Alhamdulillah, for the blessings of faith, for the blessings of health, for the blessings of community, for the blessing of Islam, for the blessing of the Quran, for the blessing of the Rasul alayhi salatu wassalam, for the blessing of our families, for the blessings of our safety, for the blessing of water, and the blessings that we could never name, because we don't know وَمَا أُتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the Rasul alayhi salatu wassalam is the last and final and most elect of His messengers. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides to the straight path, there is none that can misguide such a soul, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from amongst them. And whomsoever chooses for themselves a path of misguidance, there is none that can guide such a soul, and we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the evil of ourselves and the evil of shaitan and the bad influences in the world from making us from amongst them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatih wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you people who have attained faith, O you people of Iman, be reverent, have consciousness, have awe with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a manner which is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Give your full heart of reverence to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has created us, He has sustained us, He has provided for us. He continues to take our souls at night and bring them back to us in the day. He continues to provide for us despite the sins we commit in the day and our shortcomings. He continues to provide for us despite our shortcomings, and He continues to provide for us in our prosperity. So let us recommit with that taqwa towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you and I didn't have the taqwa that was befitting of Allah, then we work on that and we improve on that today. And it's better than it was yesterday. And tomorrow it's better than it is today. For the state of the believer, we want to be in a state where we are always increasing our taqwa and our nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For you and I don't know when we leave this world, but we can choose how we leave this world. It could be that Allah decrees our soul departs later today, later this week, later this month, year, perhaps a decade or many years from now. But that does not matter. What matters is the state of our arwah, the state of our souls, when the angel of death comes and extracts the soul from our bodies. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that an easy departure from this world into a world that we are longing to join, because it is infinitely better. And that is what we hope for ourselves and for our families. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on those who have passed from our families. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on our parents, our grandparents, ourselves, our children, our community, those who helped establish this masjid and the many masajid, and those who have always fought and strived in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I feel compelled, usually we make these du'as at the beginning of salah, but I feel compelled looking at this note to make du'a for Aisha Ali, the mother of Jibreel Ibrahim. She passed away in Ghana at the ripe age of 97. May her life always have been a life that was full of worship, and may she be meeting her Creator on the best of terms. Allahumma ighfir laha warhamha wa'afiha wa'fu anha wa tajawaz an sayyi'atiha wa akrim nuzulaha wa wasi' mudkhalaha wa jafi al-ard an janbayha. Perhaps the last verse that was revealed to the Rasul alayhi salatu wassalam, also on the topic of taqwa, is وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Be reverent of a day in which you will be turned back to Allah. You and I will be turned back to Allah. ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And every single soul, doesn't matter what you got away with in this life, or what I got away with in this life. It doesn't matter how poorly I was treated in this life, or how poorly you were treated in this life. Every single soul on that day will get its full measure. The criminal who got away will not get away. And the person who was oppressed will be handsomely rewarded for his or her steadfastness and sabr and patience. And I say this on the backdrop of the imperfect court systems in this world. While we hear that the ICC decided to uphold the ruling or the recommendation to release arrest warrants for the criminals running the Zionist state in occupied Palestine, a couple months after the recommendation was made. And so, in response to these arrest warrants for these criminals who have been committing genocide and ethnic cleansing and occupation and denying people of their basic human rights and ripping children limb from limb, you have a plethora of responses. You have people, Muslim and non-Muslim, who say, if those people come to our countries, we will arrest them. And then you have those, unfortunately, many of them in the United States amongst our own elected officials, who say, we completely condemn this and we view it as anti-Semitic, and we will implement the Hague Act, because of course the United States is not part of the International Criminal Court, the ICC. And they released the Hague Act. It is a bill in the United States that apparently says that if somebody is seized or imprisoned by the ICC, that they, the US, has the right to use any means necessary, of course their favorite means is force, to free anyone, US or allied, from their prison system. Because of course, the US has shown incredible moral clarity on these matters, and by that I mean they've shown incredible moral bankruptcy on these matters, and they've done nothing but continue to cement their moral bankruptcy and their account with Allah. And the power of this world does not mean you have any source of power in reality, for all of that is ephemeral in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the greatest have fallen in terms of their power due to their arrogance, due to their departure from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines as justice. And justice will be central to today's khutbah. And of course, this response of how dare you release these arrest warrants is nothing different than what we already know. قَالَ آمَنْتُمْ لَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ آذَنَ لَكُمْ إِنَّهُ لَكَبِيرُكُمُ الَّذِي عَلَّمَكُمُ السِّحْرَ فَلَأُقَطِّعَنَّ أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ مِنْ خِلَافٍ وَلَأُصَلِّبَنَّكُمْ فِي جُذُوعِ النَّخْلِ وَلَتَعْلَمُنَّ أَيُّنَا أَشَدُّ عَذَابًا وَأَبْقَى. As Pharaoh said, because these are the ethos of Pharaoh, these are the ethos of Fir'aun, saying, you believed in him, Musa alayhi salam. You followed the message of Moses before I gave you permission. You released these arrest warrants before I gave you permission, because we are the moral authority. We choose when you can do something and when you can't do something. Why? Because the explosives of this country and the military spending of this country is so great that it means their moral system must be the one that is correct in their corrupt minds. Just as Fir'aun thought before, because I am the leader, I know what is right, and I choose what to do, and I choose who lives, and I choose who dies. قَالَ آمَنْتُمْ لَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ آذَنَ لَكُمْ. He is the one that taught you magic. He is the one that tricked you. He is the one that is racist. He is the one that is wrong. We are the ones that are right. And all of this, of course, is on a backdrop with the ICC being based in the Netherlands after you had Zionist hooligan thugs raid the streets of the Netherlands and vandalize and mug people and abuse people and rip down Palestinian flags and chant disgusting, vile chants at soccer matches, praising the actions of the IDF in their genocide, and making fun of the fact that there are no schools in Gaza because there are no children left in Gaza. And somehow, people who decide to say that is filthy and decide to throw a punch at a vile human being like that, somehow that is anti-Semitic. And then you have the gall for the government of the Zionists to say, it's not safe for you to go to those countries and watch those soccer matches. Because of course, it's not safe to celebrate genocide outside of our illegal state that is committing genocide. People aren't really cool with genocide. If you go and celebrate your genocide in another country, they might just punch you in the face. They might. And so that's what, of course, the mass media of the West did a brilliant job, as it always does, and somehow found a way to frame this as being acts of anti-Semitism. I'm sorry. If you vandalize a country, disrupt the peace in that country, celebrate your genocides in another country, and then the people of that country who you were terrorizing decide to do something about it, that's racist? No, no, no. You are the people who are criminals, and you are always the people who have been criminals. And don't mince your words, and don't make people comfortable with their crimes. And of course, this is on a backdrop of potential cabinet members of the incoming president saying, this is the time to expand settlements. This is the time where the surrounding countries, Arab and Muslim countries, must absorb the Palestinians. And we must use the only language that they understand, force. And you have others who say, we have to stop actually calling these illegal settlements settlements. They are communities. They are neighborhoods, they say. Because of course, you can play tricks with these words to make things not feel so bad. Community and neighborhood gives you a much different feeling than a settlement. They're not settlements. They're communities and neighborhoods. You are not colonizing this land. You are coming back home to it, they say. You are not ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. You are escorting them to their new homes. You are not massacring and genociding them. You are protecting yourself. You are not stealing their water. You are making the desert bloom. You are not sniping children in the head with no adults around them. You are unfortunately killing human shields. And the list goes on. And you have to be careful what you take in from the media, because you will believe it at some point, as Malcolm X said. May Allah have mercy on him. Don't fall for these tricks. You see through all of them. And again, do not let them be comfortable with their nonsense narratives. For having those words of truth and having those moments of intellectual and spiritual clarity to say what is right is paramount. Because knowing what is right is not sufficient. Shaitan knew that Allah was true. Shaitan knew that Sayyidina Adam was a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he had something in his heart that prevented him from bowing down. And knowing is not enough without strong moral foundation, which only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that moral foundation and that iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what will compel your limbs to say, I know what to do and I will do it, rather than I know what to do but I am afraid. That is the difference. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen all of our iman, so that when we see what is right, we do what is right. And when we see what is wrong, we do not do it. And we command others to not do it. And we command others to do what is right. And of course, as they do all of these things, expanding their illegal settlements, and stealing land, and massacring people, and genociding people, or starving them, you say, stop spreading corruption in the world. And they say, we are not spreading corruption. We mean well. We're trying to establish security, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them in the Quran. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They are the ones spreading mischief, but they do not perceive it. Now this brings us all back to the theme of justice. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Be reverent of a day in which you and I will face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everyone will face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are, how long you lived, how short you lived, how much of an oppressor you were, how great of a leader you were, how little you got your rights in this world, or how you got all of your rights in this world. You will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you and I will receive every single thing that we deserve. Every single thing that we deserve. And we should recognize that, of course, the crimes that we see and we witness before our eyes, on our screens in this part of the world, at this time in the world rather, are things that some people will get away with in this life. And that should truly reinforce our belief in the hereafter. Because there are those who do not see the best of days in this world. There are those who do not see the best of days in this world. And there are those who get away with every single crime in this world. But what sends the shiver down the spine of the criminal is وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ غَافِلًا عَمَّا يَعْمَلُ الظَّالِمُونَ. It sends chills down the spine of the oppressor to hear the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not think that Allah is not aware of what you do. This topic has talked about something else, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be introspective about the justice in our spheres of influence as well. Are you and I being just with our families, with our children, with our communities, with our co-workers, with our neighbors? We want the change in the world, and we need to change ourselves also at the individual, family, communal level to impact the global scene, of course. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is recording and has always recorded and knows what is being done and what will be done. And justice will be served. It will absolutely be served. Be certain of that. And if you and I are not certain of that, then there are deficiencies in our faith. And we need to revisit that. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change the condition of a people and can change the condition of a reality on the ground. بَيْنَ عَشِيَّةٍ وَضُحَاهَا, between an evening and a morning. With a blink of an eye. Before you can say a letter. He can do all of that. And that is very easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when those criminals are brought forth in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will be shocked. ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين. They will be absolutely horrified when the book is put in front of them. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us from being from amongst these folks. May He make us of those who receive our books in our right hand and make the left hand far away from us on the Day of Judgment so that we are holding it firmly in the right hand. For us, our parents, our grandparents, our children, everyone. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to influence people so that they also receive the book in their right hands. But those who receive it in their left hands will hide it behind their back. But then they will be forced to read it. And if they don't read it with their lips, their limbs will read it for them. Because اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. Their lips will be sealed, and then their arms and their legs and the different parts of their body will do the talking for them, because that arm saw that person hit, that arm saw that person murder, that arm saw that person and was the vehicle of starvation. And it will say everything in that book. And then the person will look in amazement thinking, how? How does this book have every single thing I've done? How? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been watching and will always be watching. So please let us be watchful of ourselves first. And let us try to be a vehicle of reminding ourselves and our families and our communities so that we are collectively a more watchful community. And we can inspire and raise people in the garden of Iman to stand up for what's right. And of course, there will come forth those people on the Day of Judgment that never saw goodness in this life or got away with every crime. And Allah, Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, tells us in Sahih Muslim, paraphrasing, the condition of the person who lived a very easy life in this world and got away with their evil. And they will be dipped, sibgha, just a dip in Jahannam. And Allah will ask that soul, the millions that you had, the houses that you had, the fun that you had in this world, at the expense of others, every crime you got away with, and the billions you've embezzled, did you have any enjoyment in that life? Now, of course, they would have said they had the time of their lives prior to tasting just a dip of Allah's punishment. But after tasting that dip of Allah's punishment, they say, I never experienced anything good in my life. And then the converse happens, where the person who suffered their entire life, and from the moment they were born till the moment they died, they witnessed 4 bombing campaigns in Gaza, or they have been starved in Sudan, or they have been droned to death in Yemen, or they have been drowned by a flood, or they have been oppressed by their own parents perhaps, or by people in their family, or a country has neglected them their rights. And these people who perhaps did not see a single good day in their life, and we see this in the seerah, there were some Sahaba who, if you look at it, did not experience a single day of freedom, like Sayyidah Sumayya radiallahu anha. Came into Islam as a slave and was murdered by her slave owner. Abu Jahl. She had Rasulullah in her life, of course, alayhi salatu wasalam. He reminded her of patience, but he could not do anything to free her at that point. And she died due to torture. And people like her, who she is the first shaheed of this ummah, and others of that ilk. The people of Gaza come straight to mind, of course. They will be dipped into Jannah, sibgha, just a dip, and then they will be asked, this is amazing, they will be asked, did you experience any hardship in the life that passed? And they say, Wallahi, we did not experience anything that harmed us. Wallahi, we did not experience any hardship in that life. صبغة الله ومن أحسن من الله صبغة. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم من كل ذنب فاستغفروه تجدوه غفورا رحيما. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. We talked about the concepts of justice and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's justice is eventually going to overtake whatever happens, and that the criminals will not get away and the good people will get their reward, and righteousness will eventually prevail. Have absolute certainty in that. Please have absolute certainty in that, and interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's verses of those who are suffering. Interact with the beautiful seerah of the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, so that you can see how, despite what it might look like in this year in the hijrah, or in this phase in someone's life, or in this part of the story of Sayyidina Musa, there is that moment of ثُمَّ جِئْتَ عَلَى قَدَرِي يَا مُوسَى. I have been walking you along this path so that you eventually reach this point. That point where you are liberated from your oppressor. That point where you are receiving revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the case of the prophets. That point where you are entering into Jannah with all those who you loved, and making dua for those who you don't see, and Allah grants those to come with you. But is this just for us to sit and say to the criminals, you're going to burn in hell? Is this what Allah wants from us? No, because Allah warns us from the example of the very people who are committing the genocide we're talking about against the Palestinians in the illegal Zionist state. Their descendants were the same people who said, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ كِتَابٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ وَكَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. You see, the Banu Israel have this legacy of saying to the kuffar in Jazirat al-Arab, in Greater Arabia, in Medina and in Mecca when they were on their caravans, of saying, because they were outnumbered, they were a minority, and when there were little scuffles, business disputes, or whatever it may be, they would say, you know what, a final prophet is going to come, and when he comes, we're going to get you. We're going to win. But of course, when that final prophet came, and when that final book came, exactly with the characteristics that were described in their book of what that prophet will be like and what that book will be like, they pretended that they didn't know, or they pretended that it was not the truth, or they pretended that he is a false prophet. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam came with nothing but the truth. So I remind myself and you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command of Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu kunu qawamina bil qist. O you people who believe, be those who establish, stand firm and steadfast for matters of justice. Even if that means holding yourself to account. Even if that means standing up against someone in your family. And certainly, if that means standing up to an oppressor in large numbers who has control of the mass media and has control of the narrative, don't be afraid. Inna Allaha ma'ana. Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. How many times has the small group of people, the beleaguered group of people, the people who don't have the means, how many times have they won? Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His junud in ways you do not know. So put yourself with the pen to write something in favor of the oppressed, raising their voices. Put yourself in a position to speak on behalf of the oppressed, anchored with Iman. And let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send His angels to inspire you with words you didn't even know you were capable of, because it is from Allah. And watch Allah protect you. And if anything befalls you, it is only befalling you because it is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And know with certainty that if the entirety of humanity came to hurt you and I, they would not be able to, except that it was a matter that was decreed. And if the entirety of humanity came to benefit you or I, that they would not be able to do it if Allah decreed otherwise. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim wa barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have mercy on us, elevate us, accept from us our endeavors, accept from us our acts of worship, alleviate the suffering of those in Gaza, alleviate the suffering of those in Sudan, alleviate the suffering of those in Yemen, in Masr, in Pakistan, in Kashmir, wherever they may be. Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know the ahwal of the ummah. And it's very easy for you to liberate every single part of the ummah. Please feed those who are hungry. Accept the martyrs from this ummah. Ya Allah, feed those who are hungry and heal those who are sick, and have mercy on those who are suffering. And accept from us our dua, Ya Allah. Wa aqim as-salah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استقيموا واعتدلوا تراسوا وسدوا الفرج أثابكم الله. Please be straight in your lines and straight in your hearts. Allahu Akbar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. يا أيها الذين كفروا لا تعتذروا اليوم إنما تجزون ما كنتم تعملون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله